Despite the challenges encountered in recent years, the forest products industry remains one of the state's largest industries and its largest manufacturing industry. We want to talk to you today about where we see our future going and how we've dealt with those challenges and just give you a chance to know us a little bit better. The first thing you'll notice is that I'm not Patrick Stroud. He couldn't join us today. I'm taking his place. A poor second, but you'll get to see him later on. As I mentioned earlier, the Maine Forest Products Council has been in existence since 1961, and we've been the voice of the forest products economy. We include all the parts of the industry and throughout the entire state, from Kittery to Fort Kent and from the western border to New Brunswick. The Maine Forest Products Board is very active. We hold weekly policy conference calls during each legislative session and discuss bills of interest and arrive at a position. We're always quite engaged in what's going on down there, and Patrick and Bill Ferdinand and Michelle are down in the halls all the time. This is just to give you just a brief view of some of our members. You'll see a lot of well-known forest products names in there, but also other businesses that work with and are indirectly involved with our industry as well. So everything from banks and farm credit to truck dealerships to landowners and sawmills and pulp mills and everything in between. I want to talk a little bit about the economic impact of Maine's forest economy. This data is from 2016. We got a quick update in 2018. It had not changed. The total impact, both direct and indirect, is $8.5 billion with a B each year to the state's economy. Provides over 33,000 jobs, both direct and indirect. About 1 out of every 24 jobs in the state is related to the forest products industry, and clearly in rural areas, that percentage is much higher in many places. And about $1 out of every $20 of Maine's GDP comes from the Maine's forest products industry. And if you look at this map, you'll see that there are significant numbers of jobs all through the state, and not just up north, but all the way down into York County. And it's important to remember for somebody like me that did not grow up in Maine, this has always just amazed me, is that this is all based on a backdrop of a large block of private land that has been open to the public for literally centuries and continues to be so. And it fuels part of the state's tourism and recreation economy, as well as the forest products industry as well. It's a great system. By and large, the users really respect the fact that they're on private land and treat it well, and those of us that manage big blocks are happy to provide that access. A quick breakdown of where the revenue comes from in the state. You'll see that pulp and paper remains the biggest player. By and large, even though pulp mills use low-grade material compared to saw logs, they add a lot of value, and almost 70% of the revenue generated out of the $8.5 billion comes from the pulp and paper industry. That's followed by sawmills and wood products, then harvesting and trucking and biomass, and then there's other things. You don't see landowners here because they're the foundation of it all. The revenues are tracked through at the production level. Talking a little bit about the different sectors in our manufacturing economy and what's going on, you'll see this chart here. Lumber markets have been extraordinary this year. That's really the only way I can put it. They took a huge dive at the beginning of the COVID outbreak when people went home. You can see that right around April. And then all of a sudden they've hit record levels. If any of you that have gone to Lowe's or Home Depot or your local lumber yard to look for 2x4s, you're lucky to be able to get them, and you're paying a lot of money for them. It's fueled by housing starts, but also a lot of do-it-yourself home improvements and additions, and the fact that there's less supply than there was 10, 15 years ago, largely because of a decline of wood available on the West Coast. So things are great right now in the lumber markets and for our lumber mills, and that's fueled some really great things. There's been expansions at our mills here in Maine, and a brand new mill operating in the Anfield area, and mills are paying down debt, so this is a great place to be if you're making lumber. Also associated with that in the construction business, you have panels, and we have 2 large facilities here in Maine, the Huber mill that I mentioned earlier that makes oriented strand board panels, and the Louisiana Pacific mill in New Limerick that makes mostly oriented strand lumber and also panels. Both great facilities and provide a lot of jobs, and their markets are really good right now too. Pulp and paper is a different story. This is a long-term view of the price the pulp and paper sort of combined price, and you'll see that this year in 2020 it took a steep drop due to COVID. That was driven by a number of things. The initial drop that we saw in all kinds of parts of the economy, but also with people staying home, a lot of the use of printing papers and good quality papers has gone down. People just aren't in offices, they aren't in schools, less papers being used. There's a worldwide glut of pulp at the moment. You'll notice, though, that just recently the prices started ticking up, and we take that as a hopeful sign. It's too early to tell. And it's important to note as well that while Maine 20 years ago was almost entirely based on fine printing papers, the kind of stuff you make calendars and annual reports out of, we've been diversifying over the past decade, which is good. We have mills that are producing tissue or feeding tissue production here in Maine, and as we all noticed, the tissue is a hot commodity item these days in the stores, and brown paper boxes, packaging is a huge uptick at the moment because of people ordering things online. And while Maine doesn't make a lot of corrugated cardboard, we make a lot more than we used to of specialty packaging material, which has helped our mills weather this storm. And they continue to do so. It's a very expensive process to retool mills to change product lines, but it's been happening in all our Maine mills. One of the things that we are concerned about, one of the things that we need to look at is the consumption of biomass in Maine. Biomass tends to be low-grade material. It's the stuff that's not merchantable for pulpwood or other products. And there are two versions of it. If you look here, you get the blue bars, which is in-woods biomass. That's the leftover slash from merchandising trees into traditional products, logs, pulpwood, that kind of thing. And then the orange is mill residuals. And one of the important things to keep in mind is that our sawmills in particular, you take a round cylinder, which is a log, and produce square 2x4s and 2x6s, there's waste that's produced. Some of the waste is high quality chips that go to pulp and paper mills, so there's a tight relationship there. But things like sawdust, some of the bark, other waste materials need to find a home. They're used traditionally in biomass operations to generate energy and steam. Maine had several large facilities that did that and fed electricity into the grid, but we've lost some of them. So we're keeping an eye on that. We need to, we need to be able to get those residuals out of our sawmills and into some sort of use. And biomass has traditionally been the way we did it, burning it for electricity and heat. And then if we look at logging in the COVID era, excuse me for my coughing. If we look at the COVID era, it's been quite stressful for logging. Prior to the COVID, during the past winter, operations were strong in Maine, and the biggest risk we were talking about was labor supply constraints, getting people in the woods and wanting to be loggers. We entered mud season and the COVID era with very strong inventories at our mills and in the woods, and the initial lag of production when everything slowed down with COVID just exacerbated that problem. So we've had a decline in moving wood out of our forests into the mills, which affects loggers and landowners directly. The general consensus is that since January, wood leaving the woods into the mills has declined by about 25 to 30%. That will recover. Overall consumption in Maine, except for the loss of the digester at Jay, which we'll mention in a minute, hasn't changed a lot. So that will recover. But right now, we're trying to figure out ways to make sure that our logging capacity stays healthy and in place, because it's very hard for them to go through periods where they can't move wood and they're not operating. Looking forward, the industry itself and our federal delegation and the University of Maine and the Maine Forest Service, along with others, got together 2 years ago to start working on a roadmap for the future of our forest in Maine. It's gotten a lot of public, through the federal government, public investment to get it off the ground and getting a vision of where we're going. And it has several things in it. It has an ambitious but achievable vision of a robust bioeconomy. And what we mean by that is a combination of both our traditional industries, growing them and diversifying them, but also identifying the new emerging industries that are coming up in the forest products industry and the ones that Maine is best suited to. And with that, looking at attracting capital investment, because all of these businesses require a huge amount of capital investment. And, you know, our plan is to, by 2025 or thereabouts, to grow our industry from 8.5 billion to 12 billion. We think that that's possible. It'll require $1 billion in investment to get there. So that's not pocket change, but we think we can do it. And it's been great participating in this. I want to thank all of the participants. I sit on the executive committee of the 4Maine group, and it's doing great work and working with global firms to do market attraction and bring companies and investment here to Maine. Some of the things we're talking about, I'll just go through this quickly, is would you suspect that you're wearing wood pulp, which is actually true. Dissolved pulp is a product that's made in a lot of pulp mills, and from that you can produce a fiber called tencel. It's related to rayon, which is an old product, but it's better quality, and it can be put in things that, you know, like high quality dresses as well as flannel shirts. LL Bean says that this flannel shirt that they sell is the most comfortable and best quality flannel shirt they've ever sold. So this is an example of one of the potential new products we might be looking at producing here in Maine to diversify our industry. I want to just talk quickly about the importance of our forest and Maine's annual carbon budget. This has been carbon and carbon dioxide and dealing with carbon has been a very big topic in Maine and all over the country, as people, I'm sure you've noticed. And it's interesting that our forests actually take up an awful lot of the carbon that we emit as a state. Roughly 60% of the state's carbon emissions are soaked up by annual growth and the buildup of wood in our forests every year. Forest products, too, long-lived forest products like lumber that goes into buildings, soaks up another 15% of the annual emissions. So roughly, just doing the math, 75% of our emissions from transportation and manufacturing and everything else gets compensated for by our forests, which is really pretty remarkable. I had no idea until I started studying this recently. And the net land sink altogether is almost 80%. That helps us get to our goal of being carbon neutral a whole lot more. I thought it was impossible. When I saw these numbers, I realized, well, it's not as impossible as we thought. And one of the things that you can do to sequester carbon, of course, is use wood in buildings. And this is a place where Maine will likely play a role. These are new products. It's called either CLT, cross-laminated timber, or you might hear it called mass timber. And it's using big, very, very big panels to build large wooden buildings. The one on the left is an 8-story building that's in Portland, Oregon, that was completed, and that's the tallest wooden commercial structure in the U.S. And then in Norway, they've finished a 280-foot tall wooden building made from mass timber. This is a great use for. They basically make a lot of this stuff out of the 2x4s and 2x6s that come out of our sawmills. So we have a ready source to produce this stuff and use it in the markets down around New York and New Jersey. And I'm pretty confident that we will see a production facility in Maine at some point to produce this stuff. The Governor Mills created a climate council when she was shortly after she was elected. It's got 5 of the 6 working groups have a connection to the forest in one way or another. That group has been given the task of coming up with a plan to both reduce carbon emissions and figure out how we're sequestering carbon to make up for it so that we'll be carbon neutral by 2035, I think the date is. I won't read through all these guiding principles because I'm mindful of our time, but they started in June of 2019. Patrick Strauch was a member of it, and they've been working along. They're working on a deadline of getting a report to the governor and the legislature this December. And they're on track. They might be a little bit late because of COVID, but not very much. I want to talk just briefly about opportunities and challenges associated with the Climate Change Council and climate policy in general. There are opportunities for our industry and for our forests. There's the recognition of actively managed forest land as part of the climate solution. It soaks up carbon, and trees that are put into products leave room for new trees to grow and absorb carbon. There are opportunities to build a carbon-friendly forest bioeconomy. That's part of our plan as an industry, and it fits in well with the state's plan for mitigating carbon. And it helps create more public connections to our forest economy. There are some potential challenges. I wouldn't say that these are all imminent or a huge threat, but they're things that we need to pay attention to. We need to manage expectations for forest sequestration. So public policy that would restrict the use of our forests and that would constrain supply to our mills would probably not be productive. That wouldn't be something we'd support. Nobody's talking about doing that, but it's just something we need to keep an eye on. An overly regulatory process versus a voluntary or cooperative one is one that we would not favor as well. It usually is, those solutions usually aren't as efficient as other ones. We have to talk about and deal with folks who challenge the biogenic carbon cycle. There are folks that don't accept the fact that wood products in particular and biomass energy are carbon neutral. There's some education that needs to be done there. A lot of the recommendations that are going to come out of the Climate Change Council are expensive. They require doing things that cost more than we do today. So we're going to need to think about how we fund those recommendations and don't make ourselves uncompetitive. And and I commend folks for this, but there are calls for very big, bold initiatives to make a big, huge step in this. But we need to be careful about that because there are social and economic factors associated with that, especially in our rural communities that are often economically not as well off as our more urban areas. And we have to be careful about raising costs and for people to get around and do their business in rural areas. You may have seen this is an interesting new thing here. We got Poland Spring is working with the University of Maine to explore bio-based alternatives. Sort of the idea is to make plastic bottles out of wood. It's certainly possible. They make plastic bottles out of corn now, so they're working on doing that here in Maine. And I do want to just mention, while I just point this out, that the University of Maine is the premier research institution in the state of Maine, and they're doing great stuff on all of these things. And if there's an institution worth supporting, it's the University of Maine. Just briefly, I want to talk about, you'll hear folks talk about CHP, and in the to avoid acronyms, CHP stands for Combined Heat and Power. And these are projects where instead of generating electricity from burning biomass and throwing most of the heat away in the form of steam out of a smokestack, it takes all of the energy, it takes a much larger fraction of the energy that's produced by burning biomass to do useful things. And this is a project that's been done at Hancock Lumber. They have a plant that burns waste chips, waste wood. They generate electricity for their own use in their mills. They generate steam heat for drying lumber. They produce products that can go into bio-oil or biochar, bio-oil being synthetic fuels, and also heat that can be used for greenhouses. They're looking at building a campus to attract other businesses to feed off of this, this source of heat and power. And this is probably the future of where we'll go with biomass-generated electricity in the state of Maine. Wrapping up here, our strategic actions we're looking as an industry at doing. We're looking at building more diversity in Maine's forest products portfolio, both in diversifying our current traditional markets and facilities, as well as introducing new ones that take advantage of new markets. Expand markets based on available sustainably managed forests. And what we mean by that is that right now we have, and probably for the next few decades, we have an oversupply of fiber in the state. We're growing more wood than we're using, so there's an opportunity there to expand our businesses and do so in a sustainable way. Capitalizing on emerging global markets. Forest products is a big global industry, and Maine does export a lot of these products, but we need to keep our eye on that and make sure we keep the infrastructure there to do so. Developing our workforce. We hear often that Maine is one of the oldest states in the country, but we do have a superb workforce, and we want to make sure we come up with ways to bridge to the younger generation to keep that workforce vibrant and there. We need to think about remaining competitive from business factors. Because it's a global industry, investors can invest anywhere they want to. We need to make sure that Maine is attractive in terms of taxes, cost of energy, workforce, regulatory predictability. These are common themes. They're things that we focused on for years, but we don't want to take our eye off that ball. And then communicate this vision for a prosperous industry and all over the state, including our rural communities. Yeah, well, thank you. I hope I didn't go too quickly through that. I'm known for speaking fast, but I wanted to leave time for questions and answers and a chance for the candidates to introduce themselves. I think we're going in a great direction in the state of Maine. We have great research going on at the University of Maine. Our mills have invested hundreds of millions of dollars over the past 5-6 years to upgrade and change their processes, and literally hundreds of millions of dollars. I think we're on a great track to be a vibrant and productive industry for many years to come.